as discussed yesterday, we have seen the Commodities and Futures Trading Commission start to weigh in on all matters crypto. So we've got the CFTC chairman saying that ETH is a commodity. That is a reversal. What are we looking at here, Lucas?
I mean, we saw the CFTC. We saw different crypto companies like seeing an opening with the CFTC and understanding or challenging this notion that the SEC was the default arbiter of crypto, of money. They are supposed to be the SEC was created to guard the interests of institutional investors back in the 1930s, and the CFTC it was very interested in moving into the jurisdiction of crypto. So we've also seen this mirrored in the proposed legislation of the Fit 21 Act, with the FTC being the moderator of crypto exchanges. So we mentioned Chevron doctrine yesterday and the importance of the repeal of Chevron deference, and I think that this is part of a poking or a I don't know, a flexing by the CFTC to say that they are willing and able to regulate the exchanges of cryptocurrencies, and that there are blockchains that are being used as currency or commodity, and here are two of them. So I didn't get to listen to the specific, and this is also I mean, the CFTC didn't go out and make this declaration themselves. What they were doing was citing a court case in Illinois, maybe by the circuit court, I'm not sure which, but they are citing judicial precedents that Bitcoin and Ethereum are commodities, and I would guess that they are already building a framework to establish the regulation of the exchanges.
Right. And just tying this back to Fit 21, which there has been some discussion about what happens with Fit 21. Uh, this is a pretty good article that I had read with respect to the matter about how they want to split the jurisdiction and put various things under the CFTC, specifically where things are decentralized. And that ties in with Torres, which we were talking about yesterday, with respect to, when do these things actually transition, or what is the defining line, and how do these things fall under a regulatory framework. I actually found this article to be really, really interesting to talking about this kind of stuff. So since we were going to talk about, this post and saying, well, this is ETH and Bitcoin being talked about as commodities, Fit 21 seeks to further clarify this, which, as we mentioned, this is not law, but this is definitely on the path to what will likely be the regulatory framework under which we're going to be operating in the future.
There's a couple of things that we should also keep in mind whenever we think about differences between the SEC and the CFTC. I know that the SEC is magnitudes of order larger than the CFTC. I haven't looked up the history of the CFTC. I do believe it was started in Chicago to be close, to the railroad hub and the grain and stockyard distribution center. The SEC has very strong ties to New York City and the financial markets there. And more broadly, let's harken back to the proposed exchange that's being created in Dallas. Dallas, Texas. I think that we are seeing a collapse of New York, as especially New York City's um, control of the financial institutions of the United States. You know,
You're talking about the new crypto-backed stock trading system that BlackRock was talking about, right?
yes, and they are going to headquarter it in Dallas, and I think Citadel was behind it also. Um, and with even with on chain settlement um, instead of the I forget the acronym, the CTT, CCC, whatever, that we talked about with regards to the GameStop fiasco, the bare naked shorts of the GameStop fiasco. So well, and going back also to look, New York City, and even the creation. You know, we love to talk about history here. The creation of the union of the states. There was great discussion about, or a great concern by New York in the early years of the union, and New York City has a different history than the states. It was a commercial town. We have people talk about um, libertarian cities in Honduras and Africa. These places of free trade, or that get to set up their own rules. Najima in Japan is another one. Hong Kong follows along this concept of having a city that's controlled by a corporation, and they get to bring in their own interests. Well, New York was exactly that. It was owned by the Dutch. The Dutch bring us corporations. They were the innovators of this concept of a corporation, and on the heels of that innovation, they went out in the world and created bases, like think to even to our naval or our military bases of today, which maybe are somewhat analogous to that. But New York City was exactly that, and that was the history, as opposed to a very different history of the religious communities that established the states that were the 13 original colonies, and more or less. So this also, like, there are echoes of it in our municipal governments today. We have town councils, and we have council systems and mayoral systems, and sometimes, or oftentimes now, a amalgamation of the two. But the councils came from those Puritans up in New England, with their common lands and their common square, and the travesty of the commons. And in New York City, there was no such thing, and there was no place that was public. It was all commercial. Even the citizens who lived in New York City had to abide by the charters and the commercial rules that were established in order to be admitted into the city. But yeah, the CFTC calls Ethereum and Bitcoin out as commodities to begin with. I think we're going to see more flexing of the CFTC and making moves into crypto before we see the passage of FIT21. Hopefully, if we do see it passed.
I think we're not going to see FIT21 passed until 2025, when the new president is there, the new Congress, and that's when I would expect this to get brought up. I think we're in this is always the 4-month lull where nothing really gets done, right? So we should expect to see nothing happen, especially since we've got divided Congress. Anyway, while we're still talking about ETH, this came across my radar. This is kind of an interesting thing to look at, what's going on with the floor prices of a lot of stuff in ETH. I don't really keep track of any ETH NFT project whatsoever, but these are draw jaw-dropping, changes in floor prices on ETH. I know a lot of people are always kind of laughing that they were saying NFTs were going to go to zero, but like this is kind of in real time watching most of those NFT prices just go rocket to zero. I, Rusty, you've been keeping track of any of these? You a holder of ETH NFTs, or is this something that
I
you
have
would
a
largely
few
stay on?
ETH NFTs. None of them are on the high list to make that chart of NFTs that actually matter. I don't even have a Bored Ape or a mutant or a penguin or anything like that. But I do admire and interested in NFTs. I did my own study. I went on OpenSea and I looked through their top 1,000 NFTs by volume. And you can just scroll through. They have it all listed. It's all like categorized. And in order to get to the top 1,000 NFTs, you had to have almost 2,000 ETH in sales to be considered at that level. And I was just thinking, 2,000 ETH at least, but 1,000 projects, that is a lot of money and a lot of Ethereum that was traded through and moved around to use for NFTs. And it gets me tracking back to the thought of, when Bitcoin was first established, and what did we use Bitcoin for? Well, Bitcoin was used to, buy drugs. It was used to buy pizza. It was used to buy things on Silk Road. It was used differently than it is nowadays with ordinals and as a kind of a thing of security and its high price range right now. And I see kind of the same thing with the NFTs and Ethereum. When they
Yeah,
first
let's
came
not.
out, they were a way for us to use it, but now it's becoming something that's not so desired.
Yeah, let's not totally pick on ETH here. You mentioned ordinals, like the floor price on Bitcoin ordinals and almost every single project that got launched on Bitcoin, they've all almost dropped to zero as well. So, anybody that was trading their real sats for rare sats and for, whatever other things that were going on Bitcoin, none of that really stuck. So I think that's a good point on looking at, the various things that have happened on chains. But you said on OpenSea you had to have a thousand ETH. I didn't fully understand that. Would you sorted on OpenSea and then took a look and saw to be in the
Yeah,
top
so I
project?
sorted on OpenSea by total volume, and volume is the amount of sales you have. And in order to get listed on their top 1,000, you had to have almost 2,000 ETH in volume of sales. So a lot of the collections that we talk about and think about, they don't even make that top 1,000 list. And I was going through and I was looking at that top 1,000 list, and the number I was looking at was total sales and current floor price. And those were the numbers that were really surprising to me, that there was a lot of NFTs that had a high amount of sales, like you were saying, but their current floor price, their current sale price is a lot lower than it was in the high days in the back in their peak. And it's really hard to find a collection nowadays that has a good amount of sales and still is holding the floor price. I think I could only see, maybe 50 or so NFTs that actually are holding a decent, what I would say, decent floor price compared to what they were doing before.
All right. Should we talk about Trump for a second? I mean,
Well,
I don't have much more to say on ETH NFT prices other than I thought it was interesting. We're talking about ETH. Got to at least mention it, but beyond that, I don't have anything to say about ETH
Well,
NFTs.
I think maybe let's tie it back to the earlier topic of the Fit 21 legislation of crypto acceptance into the legal sphere. I think we are going to see an absolute boom in the use and the understanding of NFTs. But when they did not have a a way to stop people from getting rugged, to legally bind this blockchain provenance to real world assets, all these things that we talk about, that has been an absolute barrier to a true use of the possibilities. And I think we're going to see a change in a change in our understandings of don't know, blockchains and just, you know, what they bring to companies. One thing that that I think we're absolutely going to see is the return of the Barnes and Noble gift card, like the currency, corporations having access to use blockchain to have their gift cards, to have NFTs prove loyalty, that prove provenance is going to be um, I don't know, a wonderful thing, maybe to move to Trump. Um, Also, in our discussion of New York earlier, I thought we do like to talk about history here. We are going to talk about Aaron Burr at some point today because it is the day that Aaron Burr shot Alexander Hamilton. I put a link over in the private chat, Grant, of one of the greatest histories ever written in America. It's massive. If you ever get a chance, like, you can read this chapter by chapter. It is better than any Days of Our Lives or General Hospital or whatever soap opera that you've ever read. The Gotham. Gotham was the original Dutch name of New York City, and it's damn good. Um, great, one of the best pieces of history I've ever written. Anyway, I had to plug it. Never get a chance to. I haven't pulled it out of my shelf and been thumbing through it here looking for
Before
art.
we get into the Trump, one thing I wanted to cover with Lucas real quick, was the difference between, a commodity and a security. And one thing that really surprises me lately is how quickly they are to lump ETH in with Bitcoin and say if it's okay for Bitcoin, it's okay for Ethereum also. And what it means if they make that distinction between making ETH a commodity instead of a security, if that's going to change the regulatory judicial regulations on what is happening with MetaMask and everything else that is going on. Because right now they're trying to say MetaMask is a broker. And if that becomes a commodity, does that really have authority anymore?
That's a good question. I think this is where we come to the politics that are behind both the judicial system and the administrative agencies. In reality, what happens is that because of the way the federal government is set up, and the jurisdiction of the federal government is commerce. It's been very difficult for the federal government to assess taxes directly, since it did so in something like I don't know, 1801, 1810, and it taxed houses and land to raise an army to fight the French. And that was incredibly unpopular, and possibly they would not have been able to get away with it again. So, um, not only that, but these administrative agencies have emerged under the discretionary budget of the executive, or like, great idea by the president, couldn't get Congress to buy into it and fund it. Well, I'll just create that office myself and give them some of the money that Congress gave me to repaint the White House. Um, and so as they've grown in size, they needed to figure out how to pay for themselves. And part of how they pay for themselves is to go out and solicit themselves uh, to different businesses that they have declared they have jurisdiction over, and then they get funded by um, the businesses or the corporations that they are then regulating. I mean, this is why whenever we talk about the unfairness of the SEC, that the SEC can declare that Ripple is violating the interests of the people who are investing in it. But if they succeed, or if they, like, take money out of, I mean, let's not even talk about Ripple. Let's talk about J.P. Morgan and several of the banks that they have found to be in violation of their rules. Whenever they do so, the money that they fine these various institutions doesn't go to the people who lost money. It goes to the SEC. and that's how they pay for themselves. Well, the CFTC is created in the same way. Almost all federal agencies are created in that way. So you give them a clipboard and a whistle, and tell them to go out and enforce all these rules that they created themselves. And if they've enforced them, there's they can assess fines for them, and that's literally how they pay themselves. And that's part of the problem of the administrative state, as we call it. And this is also why I mentioned the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And that was attacked with regards to how it was paid, because a tax was created, a tax, I forget on what, was created to get it out of this capture by the different institutions that it would have been going out to. A tax was created so it might actually represent consumers rather than representing the companies and the corporations that
This was and that was an Obama era thing, right? That this was created during.
I think so, and I actually think it was an Elizabeth Warren idea. If it wasn't an Elizabeth Warren idea, and I mention her name too because we also have in the title Lummis abandons John Deaton, and John Deaton is the lawyer for Ripple who represented them and is running against Elizabeth Warren. And I know the crypto community paints Elizabeth Warren to be some sort of I don't know, a monster or an enemy of crypto, shall we say? And I don't, I think Elizabeth Warren just maybe understands some of the problems of the administrative state and doesn't see the administrative state as a bad thing, but tries to fix the funding of the administrative state. And so its interests are aligned with consumers. I do think that she certainly sees herself as a warrior for blue collar America, but I don't necessarily agree with her on hardly anything, but I don't think she's evil.
All right. Well, we swam into the Lummis thing, so tell us a little bit more about what's going on here, because this one doesn't jump out to me exactly why this is important, or why Bitcoin is entitled here. Like, what's going on with Senator Lummis? I know she is a proponent of crypto. She is a supporter of Bitcoin, but why should we care about her backing? What's even going on here? This one's all you, buddy.
Well, I was confused by this. Like I saw this and I said, who is Ian Cain, and how is so? Well, back up a little bit. Senator Lummis is, maybe it's Lummis, is from Wyoming, and that's very important to remember because Wyoming has 700,000 people.
I'm pretty sure it's Lummis. I don't think it's Lummis. I've heard her name said on video, so I'm pretty sure it's Lummis.
Okay, we'll knock on wood because everyone says Roger Taney and it's actually Tawny. Regardless, I know it's Wyoming. She's the senator from Wyoming. Wyoming has a population of 700,000 people. So it does not have a large representation in the House of Representatives, and it certainly benefits from the senatorial side of the I don't know, the bifurcated the dual, whatever, the senator side of Congress. And that's very important to remember, because if we go back to a time whenever the states had carved out their trusts or their piece of the.
Oh, well, wait a minute here. So so I'm starting to pick up on the thread here. So we're trying. So she's trying to knock out Warren. Is that what's going on here?
Well, I mean, yes, this is a race. John Deaton is running, and also Ian Cain is running for Elizabeth Warren's seat. Elizabeth Warren is the senator from Massachusetts.
Now she is in a safe seat, right? I mean, this is a long shot by far, right? I mean, she is super popular where she's from, isn't she? She's like a populist in where she's from, if I'm not mistaken. I'm gonna have to look at the election stats here, but like that, there's no chance in hell this ever happens, right?
I mean, that maybe I don't I don't necessarily. I don't know that. I don't know that that's. I think that's besides the point. Because if Cynthia Lummis is wants to be seen as pro crypto, and she has she and Wyoming. I mean, what else is important to bear in mind with Wyoming? Where is Cardano located? You know, where are many DAOs and crypto institutions located? Who fights the Federal Reserve banking system more so than many other states? Wyoming, Wyoming, Wyoming. And Wyoming is a state where popular sovereignty is going to get you elected. And I say popular, no, state sovereignty is going to get you elected, not popular sovereignty. And for Cynthia Lummis to be backing this Ian Cain, to me was I just I wondered who Ian Cain is and why she would not be championing John Deaton, because win or lose, John Deaton has
But Loomis is in a backwater state with no money, no population. Like, who cares what she says? Like, what I mean, compared to where Warren is sitting, she's on the East Coast, where like this is super connected. This is like center of power of the United States here, besides California. I mean, really, what
well, I mean
what am I missing here? I just
you
don't see
bring
how
up
this is at all relevant.
you
Like,
bring
cares
up
what she says.
well you bring up like really great points right there. So is this political positioning in order to coddle favor with Warren or other sitting senators? I don't know, to back off to detract from John Deaton's campaign. I don't know. Um, but it seemed unaligned to her stated values. I'll put it that way. So it caught my eye, and I thought we should also. I
Well,
mean,
let's keep an eye on it. I'm not sure. More analysis is needed here, but I'm not to say that this isn't important or whatever, but like, backing podunk candidate, unlikely to unseat
now
sitting
now
as
you're
senator.
those are fighting words, Grant. Here I am in flyover country, and you're calling me backwoods podunk. Part of
We got to throw around the good words here. I always love it. We can use the word Twitter pated and podunk, and yeah, this is good stuff.
Well, it's also, I think, if we're looking for champions of crypto, we should definitely understand that that rural states or states with a smaller population have have a have been greater losers over concepts of say income tax and the removal of the apportionment clause in the Constitution, that allows the federal government to tax the states and take more money from some states than others. And I think those states that see that thread of history in such a way are going to be greater champions of crypto, because um, whenever you add on top of that the ability when you give the federal government the ability to create currency and inflate that currency, then they become even greater losers in that world.
Well, I definitely sympathize with the more rural states. Again, this is not casting judgment upon various states and their relative populations. It's just like when you have somebody like say from Idaho weighing in on a race in Connecticut, it's like, okay, sure, you can back a candidate, but like, what is it ultimately going to mean? You don't carry far ranging influence. And I think the East Coast is much more insular. It's those states that are super close to each other. Their population density is so much higher. I mean, those states carry a lot more force of weight as far as how much money can you raise and whatnot. I mean, what does a Senate race in Idaho or Montana cost versus a Senate race that's in a more populous state? Like, it's just they're night and day differences. And I know that our republic does allow for this equal footing, but like it's I don't know. It it just I wonder how much influence like something like that actually has in a race. Who cares?
Well, it certainly is part of the. I mean, I don't know if you saw Sheldon Whitehouse's call to. uh, It's also interesting going back east. You know, some of these very small states have outsized roles, and especially the financial world. And I think that goes to alliances that again the great city of New York has created with states like Delaware and Rhode Island and Massachusetts in order to maintain a stranglehold on the financial power in the United States. So
and they are fly specks with respect to state size. You look at these and you compare it to something like Montana, and it's like you'd fit one of these states in like the lower right hand corner of it. It's shockingly different in landmass, but then you look at population and it's the exact flip. So what matters more, land or people? I think in a lot of ways it's probably population is the main driver of economic engines and also influence over what happens in the country.
well, if you think about too, relying on a system that runs on income tax versus land tax, Wyoming and Wyoming and Montana have a massive amount of land. Going back to that to the United States taxing for one of the early French and Indian Wars. I wish I could remember which it is, but taxing land. Maybe look up the window tax, the federal window tax, because they taxed houses or dwellings, dwelling properties according to the number of windows, which was pretty common at one time. That's why you see bricked up windows in old buildings, was because it lessened your taxes if you bricked up your windows. But in a world where you used to tax land versus incomes, massive states were a lot more powerful, and the velocity of money, like we don't. When I say the velocity of money, is that a term you've heard economists toss about before?
What was the term? I was busy trying to find window tax. I was trying to make sure I didn't end up like if you look at the top on Wikipedia there, it's like the term for the cost of pre-installing Microsoft Windows. Like this was surprisingly harder to come up with the right link than you would have imagined. Half of this show is me having to like Google on the fly as as you're saying things, like how fast can I actually come up with the right search response. Like it's kind of a game almost.
It is great. By the way, did you also see that Wikipedia now has dark mode? But um, well,
Ooh, yeah, I didn't see
yeah, I
that
tweeted it this
option.
morning.
Wait, where's the how do I click to switch it?
You have to go over to the settings, the Wikipedia settings, probably right there behind the FOMO banner. Um, or it was over next to the appearance, I thought. Anyway, I did it on my phone. I haven't done it on my browser yet, or I think my browser does it automatically. Um, but going back to the velocity of money, so if you think about like a dollar in a town of 1,000 people versus a dollar in a town of 1 million people, how many times does the dollar get passed around in a town of 1 million people? How many times does it get passed around in a town of 1,000? And in a farm town or a rural area, that dollar might get put under a mattress and kept there for 40 or 50 years. And so if you're taxing transactions, the the money that comes from taxing transaction goes up exponentially with more urban areas. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen politically happening in the United States since we moved to a national banking system that runs on an income tax, and not only that, but runs on financial taxes and an interest rate that favors financial institutions.
All right. Well, there's a topic I wanted to get to because I thought this is interesting. It's something I've been, I don't know, thinking that would happen, alluding that it would happen. And now we've got Trump actually saying it out loud on Truth Social right here. This actually was said a while ago. I didn't catch it though. So I didn't know that he had actually said this on April 15th. But like, there it is right there. So I think that's why it was in my head. So I know that when we talked about this recently, that you weren't sure that this was the direction or called it into question, but like here, there's some evidence on Truth Social that Donald Trump is saying that he wants to use those Bitcoin strategic reserve, whatever, to back the dollar.
Well, Ian, you just stumbled on what he had said previously. He said, I will use Bitcoin as a strategic asset reserve. And I thought, well, that's interesting. What are you going to do? You gonna give Bitcoin to the Social Security Administration? Because that'll sure win you some votes. I mean, maybe that was, and I say that because, you know, Democrat or Republican, like if you cut Social Security, if you cut money to veterans, those always look bad. So no matter who talks about balancing the budget or cutting government spending, it never seems to actually be that we cut Social Security or I mean, military spending writ large, but especially veteran. I don't know. With that said, I don't know how I'm actually. I'm going to retract that, but certainly Social Security. And so when Trump said he was going to use Bitcoin as a strategic asset reserve, I thought it would be very interesting if Bitcoin was put in its own ETF for, say, the Social Security Administration, and they had a stable coin that was pegged to that, some sort of setup like that. Who knows? But really, what does it mean? And
well, I think what it would mean, and you've schooled us on historically what it was like, right? So when the dollar was backed by gold, you know, the gold sat in Fort Knox, and once in a while we had to reconcile things, you know, like we had settlement of accounts and gold moved around via, you know, cargo ships and whatever, and you know, France demanded their gold back and whatever. And I think, you know, if Bitcoin becomes this reserve asset that is backing currencies, and I throw this on the chart as well, just because we keep tracking this. They're almost done. So whatever price action you've seen on Bitcoin, you know, it's almost all been chewed up. We definitely covered it. We said the ETFs bought almost all of it up. So this was like a generational wealth transfer. Germany's almost done. They are almost out of their Bitcoin reserve. So if Trump does something like what he says, this is definitely going to go down as one of the biggest bag fumbles of all time.
well, and I think what it really means is we've also mentioned what happened with Bukele, and if in reality Trump thinks that he is going to remove the ability to inflate the currency at the federal government, then he's going to stumble into some notion of price controls, and look how that's going over, especially with Republicans and their supposed claim that they support the private sector and laissez-faire, whatever markets, market set prices or whatnot. If I mean, if they actually believe that, they need to be getting out of the business of making money. Is I guess what my opinion is.
Well, I mean, clearly Trump isn't the one who's going to be writing these policies, right? I mean, if we look at some of the stuff that's, you know, being organized around what is likely to be his administration, there are other people who are thinking about how this is actually going to go down. I'm not sure that I've seen the document that describes how Bitcoin backing the US dollar would actually function economically. I imagine there are, you know, PhD level thinkers in the Bitcoin community who have salivated over such ideas and may, you know, think that this is how we get to some of these crazy numbers that some people throw around for what the eventual price of Bitcoin might be, you know, when there's debates and discussions about $1 million Bitcoin. I think famously what McAfee made a bet that Bitcoin was going to hit $1 million in some particular time frame, and then would like died suddenly thereafter when that, you know, bet didn't play out. I'm not saying they're tied together, but like we didn't get a chance to see the resolution of that bet. But even going back, you know, a few years, he was predicting $1 million price for Bitcoin. Saylor has said that. Hal Finney said that. So there's quite a bit of discussion about really, really high prices with respect to the US dollar. And I think that that doesn't necessarily say as much about Bitcoin as it says about the demise of this fiat currency that, is on this unsustainable path. So, there are ideas about how to reset this, how to redo it. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if, we just abandon this currency and everybody that's holding dollar bags just gets wiped out, whatever. Like they're going to make a new currency. I wouldn't be surprised. And you've given us a historical perspective that the US government has precedence for doing this, right? These are the things that we covered before where the new currency was created, airdropped, and what have you.
Well, but they get to print. If you print dollars and people lose money, I guess if I were working for the Treasury and I saw something like Bitcoin or crypto, and I saw a casino where people could magically lose money, I would be saying, well, how can we get more people to go over there and play in that casino? Because when they lose $3 billion because the price of Bitcoin drops, all of a sudden debt that has been created and monetized by the Federal Reserve, the national banking system, has been monetized and transferred into this casino. Like that, all of that money that we created is all of the money that's lost is money that we don't have to pay back. Dollars that we don't have to pay back. And so I I don't know, like all of these Bitcoin holders who talk about Bitcoin go to $1 million. We had that great clip the other day by Andreas, I forget his last name. That's a very poor measurement of the success of Bitcoin. If we really want to see, and Bitcoin has had profound success in educating and changing our relationships with our government, in understanding how governments abuse the stretching of a currency based on whatever, gold, silver, or other cryptocurrencies. So to me, it's we want to see the users. We want to see the users of a currency be benefiting from it, and to see financialization. And that's people who are making money off the transacting of a currency. To me, that is the real enemy that we're trying to curtail.
Well, and I think that that's where we had discussed, like, how does this actually play out? Backing it isn't necessarily like it being the layer under which, this works. I think it's this whole proof of work thing, and we've discussed this as well as it being the innovation, the thing that actually made it work. The thing that made it interesting was that it was really hard to do the particular thing that needed to be done, which was, all right, we're going to set up this super hard math problem, and we're going to let the network kind of rip for 15, 20 years, and that mathematical difficulty is just the thing that is going to be the thing that's going to create the wealth. The fact that it's difficult to do and that you have to put a lot of computing power at it. That was the innovation, and I don't think that it's scalable, right? That's not going to work the way that it's currently set up, but it definitely did a distribution of coins that are, according to the current consensus rules, non-inflatable, and that makes it interesting as a way to back things. It's like, as Saylor has famously said, anything that gets popular enough, usually you make more of it. If there's demand for housing, you make more houses. If there's demand for gold, you go dig more gold out of the ground. If there's a demand for a stock, you split the stock. But like Bitcoin doesn't do any of those things, and so therefore it becomes a very interesting thing to use as money. It's the hardest money that's ever been created, and if that's the case, it doesn't necessarily imply that it has to be used directly. Just as U.S. treasuries and special voting rights and whatever aren't used directly as money, but they are the roll-up asset that is used to settle accounts between major players and things that exist to do day-to-day transactions. We don't even largely operate on dollars in the United States. we operate inside of the Visa, MasterCard, whatever credit card systems. And as you mentioned, gift card systems. Like if you look at Starbucks is a massive financial engine. People have said that Starbucks doesn't even look like a coffee company anymore. It looks like a bank because of the way that their points and their gift cards are used. So, we largely operate in our modern society on what are effectively L2s, and the settlement layer ends up being like this ancient, financial institution thing that these banks have propagated and that continue to exist, but only facilitate the settlement of accounts that happens on a nightly basis on these L2s in our credit cards. So, I don't think as we're talking about Bitcoin backing currencies or anything like that, that it means that you're going to be using Bitcoin directly or on a daily basis, but it definitely can be used as a settlement of accounts, similar to the way that, specie was used to settle large accounts and nation state problems. Like it becomes the hardest money that can be that. And that's even what, Hal Finney said, likely that's what Bitcoin would end up being, was a nation state settlement mechanism for large players.
Great points. And I think again, and we've talked about this before. We're moving towards this concept of CBDCs, even though people don't want, or the crypto community has been very adverse to opening up and having that discussion or throwing that in their mind. They talk in terms of sovereignty, of getting away from taxes. I think in reality, what we're going to get away from, hopefully, and what is feasible, is getting away from financial capture. Like you bring up the credit card companies. Notice also that the credit card companies provide information to Experian, and that affects your mortgage rates for your house. So it's not as if we don't already have a lot of the aspects of CBDC worked into the system. It's just that there's a whole lot of players that get to insert themselves into that right now.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I think one that doesn't get discussed enough. There's been this fear of CBDC and how it could get linked with a social credit score, but that somewhat ignores the fact that we already live in that system, right? Your behavior in your credit card affects your credit score. Your credit score is kind of a score that affects a lot of things that you do in your life. You want to go get a job, a lot of times they're going to pull your credit history. Like there are a lot of jobs that you can't even get if you've had shaky credit. Whatever, you can't rent a property if you have shaky credit. So a lot of the things that we're fearing are going to happen, like we kind of live underneath a lot of those, but it's unthought about in the way that we're thinking about it as CBDC. But as we do think about how could it get worse, it definitely can get worse, and we need to ensure that we set up systems that don't make it worse. So I think when the legislation speaks to CBDCs and some of these legislative ideas, it's important that we think about and make movements in the direction of not making these things worse than they already are, because they already kind of suck. It's definitely, the deck is stacked against young people. It's stacked against people who are at the beginning of whatever, that don't have those social credit scores and that have a hard time establishing them and keeping them at a high level. It's really hard. Like I don't envy the youth trying to come into the system that's been set up by the boomers and and Generation X here that we're sort of living under. It's a pretty hard thing to walk into as a young person just starting out these days. But hey, moving on, I want to make sure we get some of the other stuff that you mentioned.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to quickly add two more things in there, because when you bring up like Starbucks, and the Starbucks card, that's when I talk about financialization. Like that to me is so much part of the problem. And blockchain and crypto can bring a great solution, because right now we don't know how much, we can find out, and stockholders of Starbucks can find out. But the person who's just going up and picking up a Starbucks card and maybe losing that Starbucks card, and the bank gets to not only make make money on investing the dollars in that account that people have put into that account, But then like even just making money like right out on that money, that card being lost and that account not being drawn upon. This is the problem of like that interferes with our experience as a consumer, because if the coffee companies were solely based on, what is your experience in the coffee store, what is the quality of the coffee there, that's part of the problem that we see in our world today. There's also, like, I think a lot about air carriers. Air carriers aren't necessarily concerned with the experience of people who are riding in passenger jets. They are making a ton of money on their fuel contracts.
Well, have you seen this kind of an article? Have you had a chance to dig into this much as far as, like the comparison of Starbucks as a bank? I thought this was fascinating when I had a chance to read through it.
I was not aware of the magnitudes here. Like this, like look at PayPal, unfreaking believable. Silicon Valley Bank, oh my gosh, there they are.
Yeah, but look at where Starbucks is. I mean, it's like,
Yeah,
could you ever have imagined that they hold this much cash, like as part of their reward system? I mean, this is absolutely baffling to the way that money is being deposited into Starbucks and being held interest free. It's like largely banks haven't been paying out much interest lately, but like with the rise in interest rates, they definitely are now. But Starbucks has been insulated from all of that. Like they don't pay interest on any of these rewards points. You go buy Starbucks gift cards and whatever, and like you're definitely holding your money at Starbucks, like, and getting nothing for it.
well, and so I mean, imagine Starbucks using its own blockchain, NFT, and token system, because that will benefit both the users and maybe the franchises, and coffee sellers and everything else. We got
Right. And I think one thing where I always try to drive this point home, it's important if we're going to do things in crypto that we do it better. So the thing that could be done better here is if you wanted to set this up so that it's more transparent and that things work better, you could have the ability to not lose your credit card points, right? You lose that card, there's no way to recover it. There's nothing that you can do. In crypto, we could definitely do this better. Like we could 100% do Starbucks better, but a lot of the chains are not set up in a way that they could ever beat it. And again, going back to something that we talked about yesterday, like, can you do things better? On Chia, you could do Starbucks better in a lot of ways. And maybe that's a good topic for like talking about like what could you actually do if you were to do something in a better way. Because you can make it so that those points aren't forever lost. You could set up easily type of recovery systems. And also Starbucks could say, we are going to like allow for an interest rate, or you could have an enforced interest rate on these gift cards, because just giving a gift to the company because you bought their gift card and then largely you lost the card. I mean, there's so much of what happens with these gift cards is they just get lost and the money is just like a gift to the company. And that,
well, I mean, think also you build up a history at a location, and think about it being transferable. Like this is Chia offers, I think are so incredibly powerful, because if you have an NFT that you've been building an account history and an account balance with it, because what do the locations care about? They care about loyalty. They care about loyalty, and so you could be giving discounts or whatnot, and a history to that card, and then when it becomes transferable, like unbelievable. You have some of like the dream of matching producers with consumers that Web 2 has tried to solve, and here it is on blockchain, and the possibilities are exponential. But yeah, let's move on. I just wanted to point out, and you greatly summed it up. But can we talk about Aaron Burr? I think that is our last topic for the day.
yeah, let's talk about it. So this is the anniversary, July 11th. This is when Burr shoots Hamilton, famously in the public zeitgeist because of the musical, right? I mean, most of what I think
Musical. What about the milk commercial?
I don't know about the milk commercial. I'll have to find that. Hold on.
Oh my God, look up the milk commercial. There's an old milk commercial from the 90s, and there's a guy eats a peanut butter sandwich, and he's watching a television show that's Call In if you know the answer, and he knows it's Aaron Burr, Aaron Burr, but he can't say it because his glass of milk is empty. Yes, here it is. Oh my God, so good. That's me. That's me right there. So there's so many things about the Aaron Burr duel and Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton that we have like echoes of their conflict today. I mean, they are fighting over banks. Alexander Hamilton believed in a national banking system, and Aaron Burr wanted in on that game. He had created the Manhattan Company, which also like abused and financialized things that we're talking about exactly now. It was I believe it was a water utility company that was just the water utility company was basically a front to get people to come in and hold accounts. So the Starbucks of its day. And there are other aspects about Burr and Hamilton that I think interesting in the founding fathers. They were both incredibly young. I think they were 20 or in their 20s whenever they started. Alexander Hamilton is also from Barbados. He was the whiz kid who I believe he helped John Adams. Holland Land Company, like we also talked about New York and that it was a Dutch commercial island, and Aaron Burr took flack early on for being a creature of the Dutch, an American. It's so interesting that we have all of these accusations and morals still resonate with us today. There was something else in the that kind of caught my eye with the old the Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr also wanted to at some point, I believe he was tried for treason. I have to look it up, for a plan to create a new country out west before Manifest Destiny and before the assimilation of the lands west of the Rockies. Yeah, he's an incredibly interesting character. And I don't know, Alexander Hamilton. I still haven't seen the Hamilton play. I know that they adore him and make a lot of him, but
No, hold on a minute. If you watch the play, he is not the hero of the story. He's the villain.
Who's the hero then? Well, how very interesting. Who's the hero then?
His wife.
Oh Lord. Okay, I'll
because she chronicled it, like essentially. When you first start watching it, I think that this is not obvious when you first watch it, and you might not even catch it the first time you see it, because you'll be like, oh yeah, Hamilton is clearly the hero of this story, and Burr is the villain. I don't know. I mean, it's pretty nuanced, and if you look at who wrote it, Lin-Manuel Miranda, or whatever his name is, who has famously done tons of stuff for Disney. He wrote all the music for I think Moana and like all kinds of stuff. So this dude is prolific and has done tons of musical stuff, and he really presents a very nuanced story. I don't think he gets a lot of it right. There's a lot of artistic license taken in this story to tell it, and it's fun because instead of there being, cabinet meetings and whatever, it's all done with rap music, so it's great. It's entertaining and it's very modern. But, in the story, I mean, Hamilton does so many like questionable things. Like he cheats on his wife, and like that is very well documented in the story. And he's, like gets his son killed. And like the more you watch it, you're like, oh, this guy was just a total piece of shit. Like, what is going on here? Like he did so many of these horrible things, and then his wife like is like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like this guy was not good to me. Like he's very bad. What should I do with his legacy? And I think the way it's presented, she grudgingly sort of decides, well, I've got to document his life and his legacy, and I'm going to paint him in the direction that is best, and try to leave it at that. But like essentially they show him getting his son killed in a duel, and cheating on his wife, and just like doing all these things, and it's like, oh, this is not a good guy at all.
Well, does it comment on his associations with the National Bank?
It does. It deals with like the ways that they said, you're against the small farmers. You're just moving money in ways that benefits the rich. You've established this bank that doesn't help the country. You're hurting democracy. It's chronicles his fights with Jefferson, about Jefferson saying you're the worst thing that ever happened to this country. I mean, yeah, it doesn't pull any punches at all.
Oh, well, that's and I mean, I would love to watch the show, but when you live near Wyoming, it doesn't come by very often.
Well, you can catch it on Disney Plus, so it's
Is it a
streaming.
movie now?
They shot they shot a video of the musical, so you can actually see the Broadway show as it was staged, or with the original cast. Yeah, and it's on Disney Plus, so you should definitely check it out, Lucas. I'm sure your historical perspective, you'll look at it and groan, but it's entertaining nonetheless. And I think they do get some parts of it right. Because as soon as I saw it, like my first reaction was, "What is this? This can't, this isn't my reading of history." And like I was like not really that interested in it. And I was told, no, you gotta watch it. You gotta watch it. It's kind of cool. So as I started watching, I was like, oh, this is kind of fun, whatever. And so it's good music in it, and it's interesting. And then I immediately had to go look at what inspired them to write it, and there was a historical, much more accurate depiction of it, and that book was much better, and definitely there were mass deviations from the story, but they got a few of the points right. Some of it. He's definitely not the hero.
Well, that's awesome to hear. I had just assumed because it was written for a New York audience, and Alexander Hamilton was such an outsized role in banking, and with New York's position in the financial system, or New York City's position, I figured it would be much more pro Hamilton. I would. I've talked about the airdrops of the National Banking Acts, and that sort of restart of the national banking system. And I thought it would be interesting if there was ever a follow up to start out west in New Mexico with the land grants of New Mexico, and to begin to try to unpack both our national banking system, its association with railroads, the progressive and populist movements, and the equation that they've made since I don't know, the expansion into the West of land and property rights, which would piggyback so well off of the first fight, which do they get all the way to Jackson? By the way, do they get to Jacksonian democracy and the repeal of the bank? The national.
No, it ends with Hamilton being shot, and then they sort of wrap it up from there, just with like what his wife does. And that's why I say, his wife is kind of painted as the hero, because she's sort of wronged throughout all of it. Her position is emphasized as being one of this Schuyler, or whatever his name was. I actually think he's mentioned in this Wikipedia article. Yeah, that Philip Schuyler was her father, and sort of her position in the world, and then like how she represents his legacy after he died, because there was this voluminous amount of writings that Hamilton was sitting on top of it. It's like it's repeated in the songs. He wrote day and night. It's like the amount that the dude actually penned, as far as things that were published and unpublished, and she eventually puts it into like an 83 volume set or something like that. Crazy. It's just this massive amount of writings.
Well,
but that's where it ends. He gets shot, it ends, and then sort of there's this reprise, and they talk about how she documents his legacy.
Well, I'm definitely, and I think interesting that they tell from her vantage point, a stroke of genius.
Well, hold on. It's not told from her vantage point. Like, it definitely focuses on Hamilton, and he's got a lot of the singing parts. Like it's definitely him. I'm saying he's not the hero. you'd think he was, but he's not. Like as you watch it, you're like, this guy's a bad guy. He's not the hero. Not the hero at all.
Okay, well, I did not know that I could watch it on Disney, and it's I've been absolutely I've wanted to ever since it came out. So before what was the movie that you wanted me to watch last week? Before The Great Short, or
yeah, the three movies I said was the Big Short, Trading Places, and then soon to be released The Bear Trap.
Well, maybe I'll watch it when it's released. But before all of those, forefront of my watching queue is going to be Hamilton, because I've been very interested in I don't know, its reintroduction into the American psyche. So, but fun. We're all over the map today. A lot going on. I enjoyed it. So, and we can always pick apart. There's so much apart. Aaron Burr. I really wanted to get into. I was thinking
we got to talk more about Andrew Jackson as the bank smasher, right?
I mean, and Andrew, yes, because Andrew Jackson. I mean, and with all of these characters, like when I was a kid, like Alexander Hamilton was this great. One of the brilliant mind that created so much of our political world, and Aaron Burr was a dark, insidious character. Andrew Jackson, the same. Andrew Jackson removed the native peoples to Oklahoma, so I have a dagger in my eyes for him for that. But whenever I started getting into banking and money, like so many things get flipped on their head when you start digging into that realm. So
if you can school us on this one, I would love to hear you talk about Andrew Jackson, because I'm sure you'll give us a very nuanced.
I go crazy. I used to every 20 that I got, I used to put devil horns on Jackson. I don't do that anymore. I know, and I would write Bitcoin on it would be interesting if somebody found some like old 2007 2008 notes that I'd written.
Oh, that'd be fun if you can find one. Like you'll have to maybe show us how you, because it's not even illegal to deface a bill like that. It's only illegal if you ruin it, right? You can't.
I don't even know that it's illegal to ruin a bill. It's illegal to counterfeit it. I used to do, especially, I like $2 bills. There's some of my favorites. I used to go to the bank and get rolls of $2 bills to hand out to people. A lot of people think that they're fake, so which is interesting. Now they're almost like a 50-cent piece. I mean, what could you buy with a $2 bill? Half a Dr. Pepper.
Make sure you get the red stamps.
Well, here's what it says. So I don't. It's like it prohibits the mutilation, cut, deface, defigure, perforate, or otherwise damage draft notes. Not sure exactly what those words actually mean. Perforate. So that means you can't punch holes in them?
Maybe. But you can certainly bring a bill that's been perforated, or I mean, what are they going to do? Catch you in the act of it? Like film you doing it?
I don't know. Maybe if you admit to it in a recorded space.
Well, I think that drawing horns on Andrew Jackson and a mustache on George Washington. All right, if that's the first time I've ever been hauled to jail, then I'm doing great.
I guess someone would have to find evidence of you actually doing it. Maybe mentioning it in a recorded space isn't enough. You would have to have video evidence of you doing it, and then maybe trying to use it or take it to a bank or something.
Well, adolescent children across the United States, take note.
That's right. You were a minor when it happened, so whatever.
That's true.
You get your free pass in the U.S. Our non-U.S. People may not know this, but anything you do before the age of 18, sort of, you get a free pass for it, unless it's really, really bad, and then they try you as an adult.
It would be interesting to make the case that because of the abuse of the production of the banknotes, that I mean, if you file off the edges of a gold or silver coin, that has a financial impact of a much greater consequence to the government. But if there are trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars out there, trillions of banknotes, and there's not really trillions, there's only billions of them. If there are billions of banknotes out there, then that's a much less of a cost for them to cover reissuing that banknote. One other thing that I wanted to put on your radar to have maybe a discussion about, because the House is having the vote, Anna Paulina Luna's
Wait,
vote.
before we do that, we're clearly going a little bit over here, so we're going to give it some time. So I've got a couple extra minutes, and I don't care. We'll go a bit over. Let's talk about this for just a second. So in times past, I think what you were talking about is coins were money. They were the physical metal. You had a lump of gold, a lump of silver. And so when we're talking about shaving the coin, we're actually talking, they would actually scrape some of it off in a way that was somewhat undetectable, right? Unless you put it on a fairly precise scale, which we did not have back in those days. Like you could weigh a coin against another coin and you could see if it balanced. So if you knew you had a good coin straight out of the mint or the treasury or whatever, and you knew that it hadn't been adulterated or tampered with, you could compare them and you could say, well, these don't balance. So if they don't balance, whichever one is lighter has been mutilated or shaved, right? So that was easy to do. But the thing that we do, which is much more innocuous and horrible, is we just reach in virtually and shave your coins. So the US government has shaved your coins like every single year they have put new dollars into circulation. So in times past, you had to do this physically and you could actually check the money. Now you can't do either of those things without a lot of sleuthing and without really knowing how the banking system is working. And so I think that this is the this is the pushback against the U.S. dollar that has largely been going on. Is that this mutilation of the currency has been going on apace, especially in the last few years. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he didn't even know that so many dollars had been created. And I'm going to stop saying printed because you keep calling me out on that. So I'll just say the word created. But I actually get the word printed from the Fed chairman because he said printed and then he says printed digitally. But yeah, this is, I think, what you're talking about with the mutilation of the coins, right?
Well, 100%. And this actually, so just some interesting factoids. When you see the abbreviation for the dollar and it's 2 bars over an S, the bars have to do with the technical innovation that curtailed the shaving of the edges of coins. And so they started putting ridges around the edges of coins of silver dollars, which actually goes back to the Dutch. And again, like Dutch, so preeminent in money, technological or innovations. So anyway, the abbreviation is 2 bars to signify that the coin had not been adulterated because it had the innovation of the ridges that we see around, say, a quarter. So, and if you look at a penny, it has smooth edges, but a quarter has the little bevel or the ridges on the edges, and that's where we get the dollar sign. Goes.
Well, I had seen this hypothesis of where the dollar sign comes from is that it's a depiction of the Pillars of Hercules. No?
I think that's no.
Well, this is right out of Wikipedia.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Wikipedia is quoting some bankers from.
You know what's funny here, though, is that they show this dollar sign, but the dollar sign has traditionally had 2 of these lines.
Well,
not
and
one.
that again, that goes to anyway, the dollar is also taller, THALLER, goes back to the Dutch because it's some of these words about money. Here's another thing that I find fascinating while we're on the subject, Grant. Think about the coin set model of the United States. You've got a quarter, you've got a dime, you've got a penny, but they are not physically. The dime is much smaller than a nickel or a penny. Isn't that interesting? Because in a world that made sense, wouldn't the sizes correlate to the amount of the dollar they are, and that goes. I mean, it's
Well,
also
I thought it had to do with the various metals that were being used, right? Because
that's part of it, and that's why we call a nickel a nickel.
it was made out of nickel. It still is made out of nickel.
Maybe.
No, it is for sure.
I mean,
No, nickel is
how much
it's
copper is
not
in a
pure
penny?
nickel. It's not
Well,
pure nickel, but it's still got nickel in it.
how much copper is in a penny even more? Like you couldn't.
Well, no, hold on. 1983 was the cutoff line for a penny being pure copper. Because this was actually an interesting subject because like as the dollar has become devalued, the metal assay in various coins has flipped. Nickels, I think, are there where the value of the metal in nickels exceeds the value of the nickel itself.
Well, so if you think about British coins, and it's also interesting, also like going back to these notion of ETFs and baskets of currencies, that the coin set model of the United States has a couple of different metals. That also speaks to the wealth of resources available to us in the United States. But go back to Britain and look at their coin set model, and you'll see that they have a pence and they have a half pence, and the half pence is merely the pence like cut in half. It's a half moon. And the quarter pence is the pence with a hole drilled through the middle of it. So I think those are very fascinating to think about. And not only
there you go, right there. Here's the metal assay of nickel. It's right there.
okay.
75% copper, 25% nickel.
Well, I'm just saying, like it. Well, I guess the other thing is we have the dollar that's a paper banknote that's also a magnitude, like a hundredfold greater than the coin set model. And then you go back to Europe and notice that the banknotes go like right down to the pence.
Yeah, I think the British stuff was more aligned to like how the coins, just like laid out. But I think because we had bimetallism in the US, that was where this got weird too, because there was this, whatever composition of the coins, but it was simpler earlier, right? I mean, it was copper, silver, gold. I think was copper, silver, gold, nickel was what we were using as far as the metals, if I
Yeah.
recall. Is that right? Does that track? Silver
Um,
dimes. I remember. I have silver dimes. I used to have them, like silver quarters too, silver
uh,
dollars.
yes, but that's a broad generalization, so I hesitate. We do need to close up. I got to get one thing before we go, though. I do want to put it on your radar to have a conversation about because of the because of the the rattling of sabers with regards to impeaching Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito in the wake of some of these cases, and also I don't know, gifts or associations that they have outside of the Supreme Court. I wanted to also bring up Samuel Chase and his impeachment, and that also brought me to the first case that the Supreme Court heard was with regards to a farmer printing currency. So I don't know when we'll have time to have those discussions, but it should be fun. But I can't believe that I'm cutting short a conversation about seniorage and debasement. Those are some of
Well,
my
hey,
favorites.
well, we're over time. I know we're trying to keep this to an hour, but yeah, and we didn't get to one of our topics, which was Merrick Garland, who we have noted that was getting charged with contempt of Congress, right? And that's happening today. So probably tomorrow we'll have a good summary of what happened, right?
Hopefully, yes, and yeah, well, let's definitely cover it tomorrow because I think it is it's a fraud issue. Like I don't think that the executive or agency should be able to turn their nose up to Congress. But I think, well, let's cover it tomorrow. Let's cover it tomorrow. We got to get.
And definitely I want to hear your take on AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her introduction of impeachment against two U.S. Supreme Court justices. Like, I think that'd be good to topic for tomorrow as well.
Oh, I'll probably surprise you and many people with that. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Enjoyed it.
All right, sounds like it's gonna be a fun Friday.